Good morning, afternoon or evening everybody. Welcome to part 3 of the Panther 44 scale model build series. As always, you can find a link to the first 2 episodes in the top corner, which covers the build phase of the tank. This video will focus on laying down the ambush camouflage scheme and adding the decals. So without further ado, let's paint this thing. The first thing we need to do is strip the model down as far as we can without breaking it. This will make painting a whole world easier. I find the easiest way to paint the wheels is to stick them on the end of some cocktail sticks and paint them individually. Now the tank is stripped as far as it can go, it's time to lay down a healthy coat of primer. I am using this one-shot black primer by MIG Ammo for this task, sprayed through a large 0.5 nozzle. This process is crucial to give a good foundation to the paint, reducing the risk of peeling or chipping later down the line. A good coat is added to all the parts until they are as black as night. Once a good coat of black is laid, it's time to move on to some highlights. For this, I use a mixture of white and sea grey at a 5:1 ratio. I then start putting the lighter colour down on all upper surfaces of the tank to create some false shadow. I also use this to add some variation in the paintwork, simulating wear and tear and sun damage. I keep going over all areas I want a lighter touch, mainly sticking to the middle of panels and sky-facing areas. For the wheels, I focus on the large surface area parts and the figures painted from the top, both in the attempt for some false shadow. With all the parts shaded, it's time for the base coat. This is done with XF60 dark yellow and white at a ratio of 8:1, mixed 50-50 with acrylic thinner. I have previously found the dark yellow by itself is too dark, so this helps mellow the color somewhat. This yellow was called Dunkelgelb, the base coat for all German vehicles in the mid to later war period. I am extra careful here to lay a thin layer over the top of the shading and not completely eradicate all my hard work. Thin layers is key here. Put too much down, you risk starting the process again or having no shading whatsoever. Now it's time to add the camouflage scheme. This pattern was called Ambush Camouflage and consisted of yellow, brown and green with a speckled pattern over the top. I start with Tamiya XF64 red-brown with a couple of drops of white, mixed 50-50 with acrylic thinner. To get as sharp a line as possible with the airbrush, I swap to a 0.2 nozzle. This takes a bit of time to fill in, but gives the camouflage good definition. I use the paint guide to help plot the lines, but I'm not overly precious about getting it dead on, as in reality this scheme would be painted in the field, so would vary slightly between tanks. To paint the turret, I attach it to the hull. This ensures the pattern lines up when the gun is facing forward. I believe this was fairly standard on German armor. The wheels I paint randomly, just trying to add variation to each one. Once the wheels start rolling, the camouflage wouldn't line up to anything anyway. Once the red-brown layer is added, it's time to move on to the green. This time, I add a couple of drops of yellow just to lighten it a tad, as it does come out very dark over the yellow otherwise. Apologies, I have no ratio for this, but I did it to eye until I was happy with the finish. This is pretty much the same process as with the red-brown, painting a careful outline, then filling in the space. I do really enjoy painting these German camouflage schemes. They add a great deal of interest to the model. You can say what you want about the reliability and tactical approach to German armor, but at least their camouflage schemes were cool. Again, the turret is put in place to line up the pattern with the hull. The paintwork will look quite flat at this stage, but it's important to trust the process. Once we start detailing, chipping and weathering, this will break that flat painted look and add depth to the paintwork. Now the main bulk of the camouflage is laid, it's time to add the speckled pattern over the top. I hand paint these on, as they would have done in the field, just with a slightly smaller brush. I start with the green, which goes over the yellow portion of the scheme. These are painted completely randomly, just spacing out quite far to start with, and adding specks until I am happy. All the colors are inverted for the specks. Green goes on the yellow, brown goes on the green, and yellow goes on the brown. I carefully try and remix the colors to get them as close as possible with the camouflage base coats and add a small amount of thinners to make them brush paintable. This process is repeated across the entire tank and also onto all of the wheels. With all the specs added, that's the main paintwork complete. I am pretty happy with it at this stage, really starting to take shape. Now we need to lock in our hard work with a coat of satin varnish. My go-to for this process is VMS satin varnish. This stuff can be sprayed straight from a wide nozzle or thinned down for smaller application. I give the whole thing a healthy coat. This will both protect the paint from knocks or scratches whilst working and also protect the acrylic from the enamels and white spirit in the weathering process. Now it's time to add the decals. The first stage is to add a gloss coat to all areas that will have a decal applied. This will help the decal sit flat on the surface and lower the chance of silvering. I apply a coat of Tamiya gloss mixed with acrylic thinner to all these areas. Once cured, we can now start applying the decals. First step is to cut out the decal, then let it soak in some water. Next, I add micro set to the area the decal will be applied. This helps soften the decal and helps it sit flat on the surface. When the decal has soaked, I apply to the side of the tank and carefully edge it into position. To get rid of any excess water, I carefully roll a cotton bud over the surface. This will push any excess water out from under the decal and soak it up. To soften the decal further, I add some micro set over the top and let it do its thing for a couple of minutes. Then I carefully press a cotton bud over the surface to really push it into the textured panel. If the cotton bud starts sticking, just dab it in some water first. And that's it, the process of adding decals. I repeat that process on the insignia on the side and the rear numbers. Once all the decals are applied, we need to get rid of that glossy shine. I do this by going over the areas with the satin varnish. This will also help lock in and protect the decal. And that is it for this video. If you have enjoyed the episode or found it vaguely helpful, please do hit those like and subscribe buttons and let me know your thoughts in the comments. Next up, we will be painting the details to the tank, along with a motherload of chipping, so stay tuned for that. But for now, farewell and happy modeling, everybody.